12 horses entered for their chance to run in the Kentucky Derby. Let's take a first look at the Wood Memorial. Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets. Here are the first look preview of Saturday's Wood Memorial taking place at the historic Aqueduct racetrack. This is the 100th running of the Wood Memorial. Make sure to check out that YouTube short hype video that we created for this year's running of the Wood as well. But listen, before we get into the first look where we're going to run through all 12 entries, and you got Bob Baffert, you got Todd Pletcher, you got Brad Cox, you got Bill Mott, you got Chad Brown, you got all the big heavy hitters entering horses in this race. But before we get to that, I want to encourage you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel. You can get race previews, full card analyses, first look previews like this, weekly programming around the Derby and Oaks, handicapping and betting tutorials, and so much more. So press that like and subscribe button today. All right, well, like I said, we have a field of 12 for Saturday's running of the Wood Memorial. This is, of course, a 100-point Kentucky Derby prep taking place the same day as the Bluegrass at Keeneland and the Santa Anita Derby out west. So a lot of things that we're going to be able to see here. These horses with their final chance in some instances to punch their ticket to Churchill Downs come that first Saturday in May. Let's dive into this field, talk a little bit about this field of 12. And listen, I think you have to start right on the inside, and that is Rodriguez. That's right, Bob Baffert shipping in Rodriguez from California. I think that is a big storyline here. The Baffert runners to this point have disappointed. Let's just be honest. When you talk about a horse like Barnes, well, the bloom's off the rose, but we'll certainly see entering at Santa Anita Derby. But his number one horse, Citizen Bull, obviously has already punched his ticket to the Kentucky Derby. It could make it a more emphatic statement by winning the Santa Anita Derby this weekend. But you look at his other runners, Cornucopian, blazed out in the Arkansas Derby, Matticat Road, faded in the Florida Derby, Gaming and Getaway Car, probably more Pat Day Mile type horses. So suddenly that very deep bench of Kentucky Derby hopefuls that Baffert has really thinned out. And now it really is Citizen Bull and maybe Barnes, maybe Rodriguez. But Rodriguez is an interesting horse because he's a horse that's been asked, I would argue, to do the dirty work for his stablemates. And what I mean by that is a lot of times he's been asked to sit off the pace and kind of flank off of the preferred Baffert, shall we say, whether that be a horse like Citizen Bull or Barnes. Sit off of those horses. Don't go straight to the lead. I think Rodriguez, now that he draws that inside post, is very dangerous in this race because this is a horse that I think is different on the lead. And if this horse can get out up front on the lead, I think you're just going to see the best possible version of this horse, which is what you saw in his maiden breaking victory, where he earned a 100 buyer speed figure. He's got legitimate speed. He's been asked to sit second. He's been asked to sit off Citizen Bull, sit off of Barnes. That's not his game, I don't think. And I've always kind of felt bad because he's not being asked to put his best foot forward. I think he could be a major pace presence in this race, obviously, but if he gets loose up front and that inside rail, I think really forces the issue for jockey Mike Smith aboard, he's going to go and he's going to get out there. And if he leads him into the first turn, he could take him all the way around. That would not surprise me at all because, again, I think he's a different type of horse when he's out up on the front end. Now, that said, there's some other speed in this race. There's some pretty serious speed. You look at a horse like Sand Devil for trainer Linda Rice. This is a horse that, stretched out a little bit longer in the Gotham, now coming back to run again. And I think, again, a very good horse, very capable horse in this spot, a New York bred who's got a lot of speed. It's stretching out. So that's a horse that's going to be up on the front end, really pressing the pace. I think you could look at a horse like My Matoli, also a horse with outstanding early speed. And then you look at a horse like Captain Cook for trainer Rick Dutrow Jr. That's another horse, very good early speed, though does have some ability to sit off of the pace there. But it really does start, I think, from a pace standpoint with Rodriguez. And if he's a horse that can get loose up front, he's very dangerous in this spot, despite the fact that, like I said, you don't see Baffert shipped to Aqueduct very often. And you also don't see a lot of these Baffert horses firing particularly well this Derby season. So he's going to try to reverse some trends. But like I said, I think that you can look at a horse like Sand Devil, certainly is going to apply a lot of pressure there. And this is a horse that came in second, the Flood Zone in the Gotham, and it was a distant second that day. And, tried to maybe sit off the pace a little too much, get a little too cute up there. That was one of those races where, going back and watching that Gotham again, there was supposed to be a lot of speed in that race. And it was suddenly a race where everybody kind of looked around at each other thinking everyone was going to go and nobody went. And I remember that was where Raylu Gutierrez aboard Flood Zone that day just really took the initiative, went straight to the front once he realized nobody was really going to take it for themselves. I think Sand Devil maybe got a little too cute that day. Don't overthink it. Send. That's what this horse does. Just go. The horse is fast. So I think just going straight to the front with a horse like Sand Devil or sitting just off the flank of a horse like Rodriguez is really the play for Linda Rice's horse in this spot. And, those are going to be, I think, two major pace presences. Like I said, you certainly have a horse like My Matoli, another one that is going to be a major player here. And going to be interesting to see how that early pace scenario shakes out. McAfee, another one for trainer Rick Dutrow Jr., a horse that has been on the vet list a bunch, has been trying to run at different spots, and finally kind of maybe is starting to get healthy again and is starting to put some races together, but another one that might be a part of that early pace presence as well. A couple of other interesting horses, though, that we really need to touch on in this race. And a lot of horses coming in a little bit from outside of town. And a couple of those in particular is a horse Grande and Statesmen. I want to talk about both of those horses. Grande, the number 7 horse, is coming in for trainer Todd Pletcher. Now, Todd has not had a particularly deep bench this year with regards to his Kentucky Derby hopefuls. We saw a horse like Disruptor coming off a last out maiden victory, finished also ran a kind of a somewhat disappointing 4th place finish in the Florida Derby. And you've not seen him have the fortes, the fiercenesses yet this year. And so with Grande, one of the things I will give this horse a lot of credit for is the horse has done the distance already, has already gotten the 1 1/8 miles. Todd even mentioned he thinks this horse can handle the Aqueduct track rather well. It's a little bit of a deeper surface. He mentioned that he had less concern about sending Grande up here as opposed to Disruptor. He felt like Disruptor kind of needed the help to get that 9 furlongs. He doesn't really feel that way about Grande. Grande's already done the distance, can do that work, has already won that kind of first level allowance as well. Not that there aren't questions to answer with regards to stepping up in class, but I think a horse like Grande for trainer Todd Pletcher certainly is one that you could take a really serious look at and make a case for being able to get this distance, being able to like this setup that he's going to get, drawing a little further outside in this race. Then you look at a horse like Statesman for trainer Shug McGahee. This is one that, typical Shug McGahee special. Took a while to develop, a little bit of a layoff, comes back at Tampa in January and breaks his maiden, going 2 turns, then steps up, faces Allowance Optional Claiming Company, wins again going 2 turns. Now, those were both 1.40 miles, so stretching out a little bit to 1 1/8 miles here, though the way he finished both those races, you would think that he's going to be looking pretty good. He's been up here in New York training, getting ready for these races. So Statesman, another one for Shug McGahee, looks pretty serious in this spot. McGahee's not the type to put a horse in a race where he's over his head. He's a very thoughtful horseman. He's one that's going to take his time. And I think what you're seeing with him in this case is a lot of confidence in a horse like Statesman to enter him in the Wood Memorial. He's been breezing beautifully leading up to this race. I'm a big fan of Statesman in this spot. I think he might present some intriguing value potentially. I have to wait for that morning line to come out for morning line maker David Aragona. That's going to tell us a little bit more about where some of the betting money might be going in this race. But I would imagine a vast majority of that money is going to go to Rodriguez and Grande. A couple of other horses to really talk about when you're looking at the way this race is going to shake out. We've already talked about Rodriguez. I think major pace presence, you got to take pretty seriously. Sand Devil. I don't know if he can get the 1 1/8 miles. I think his best chance to do it is up on the front end. I'm glad Linda's entering this horse. He's certainly run well enough to deserve a shot here. If he can get the mile and an eighth, we'll see. Remember, he's yet to do a 2-turn race. That Gotham, where he finished second, was a 1-turn race. He ran well that day. And like I said, I don't think he got the ideal trip, but he ran pretty well. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, I think there are some questions there in terms of the 2 turns and being able to sustain that 2 turns if he's facing pace pressure, if he's not able to get the lead from a horse like Rodriguez, has to sit off the pace. Now, one of the horses that I think is also really interesting in this race is Omaha. This is a late running horse who's coming off a 3rd place finish in the Virginia Derby, 3rd place finish in the Withers, 2nd place finish in the Jerome. This is a knock-around type of a horse. Now, this is probably the best field he's faced to this point. You just heard me list off some of those other races. He made a nice run in that Virginia Derby, I thought, from the back of the field on a track that had been very speed favoring. You weren't making up a lot of ground that day or really that weekend at Colonial Downs. And so was maybe running against the track, has run well over the surface at Aqueduct before, does draw that far outside post. The thing is, he never gets away quickly. He's going to be a late running horse. So in many ways, he's going to break and just make a hard left-hand turn, get over to the rail, save a lot of ground. He's not a sort of early mid-pack runner, tracking runner, where you might get caught 3-4 wide going into that first turn. But he's a horse that's going to benefit from pace. So if Rodriguez and My Matoli and Sand Devil, if all these horses want to go out and run a little bit, you see horses like Tiger 24, Bear Claw Necklace for Saffie Joseph Jr. You see some of these other horses maybe want to get out up front and go. That's going to only help horses like Omaha, and the number 6, Hill Road. Hill Road is, of course, for trainer Chad Brown. Coming off of an effort last time out in that Tampa Bay Derby with Chancellor McPatrick as stablemate, that was a very speed-favoring track, and there was no pace in that race for him to run into. I think he's going to get both things on Saturday. I think he's going to get more pace, and he's going to get a more fair track. Hill Road is one of the few horses, really was the only horse who made up ground in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile and made up a ton of ground late to finish 3rd that day. This was a horse that had previously only ever run in Europe, went over, ran a really good 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, was transferred to trainer Chad Brown, has blinkers now, and is, like I said, making his 2nd start essentially off the bench. I think Hill Road's got a real shot here if he gets the right setup. I think that's the key, is he can't maybe be as far back as Omaha is. I think he's a horse in terms of Hill Road that needs to be more mid-pack if he wants to have that attempt at a winning trip. But the reality is that he should get more pace to run at, or certainly a more contentious pace to run at. I think stretching out is only going to benefit Hill Road. So you look at that, that's another, I think, like I said, really interesting horse that you could take a look at in this race. So to me, this is a really strong field, a very competitive field from a betting standpoint between Rodriguez, Captain Cook, Sand Devil, Hill Road, Grande, McAfee, maybe to a lesser extent, Statesman, and then a horse that I just am fond of in Omaha, who, like I said, is kind of a hard-knocking underneath type of a horse. You have a lot of potential betting interest in this race. We should talk about Captain Cook because I've not mentioned him to this point, but this is Rick Dutrow Jr.'s best chance at a Kentucky Derby entry this year. Coming off a win in the Withers, has not been seen since. The fact that he hasn't been entered in, the fact he didn't go to the Gotham, the fact that he's been waiting to run in the Wood Memorial, he's not been going anywhere else, in my opinion, tells you a lot about the confidence Dutrow Jr. has in Captain Cook. I made this point last week in the Florida Derby about Tapan Street, that Brad Cox must have had a lot of confidence that horse was sitting on a big race because he wasn't in the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby. He needed to win or finish 2nd to get into the Kentucky Derby. And we saw what Tapan Street did. He went out and won the Florida Derby and beat Sovereignty. I think you could look at Captain Cook the same way. Dutrow Jr. has to be confident in this horse because he's not entered him anywhere else. And he's not in the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby right now. He needs to win or finish 2nd, maybe 3rd, but probably win or finish 2nd in order to ensure a spot in the Kentucky Derby. That's a lot of pressure to put on a horse, but it also means I'm really confident this horse is sitting on a big race. Remember, he earned a 94 Beyer speed figure for that Withers. That's a big number. That's particularly a big number because we still don't see big numbers being run by a lot of these horses. I mean, Sandman in the Arkansas Derby ran a 99. Tapan Street, who I mentioned in the Florida Derby, ran a 94. So we're still not getting overwhelming numbers from a lot of these horses that are running. I think American Promise ran a 95, if I'm not mistaken, in the Virginia Derby. So again, 94, 95, 99, that's kind of where we are. Captain Cook's already run a mid-90s buyer, could move forward from that. I know Andy Serling has been very high on this horse for a while. I don't know how good that Withers was. You go back and look at the field, you go, well, there really wasn't much there. So I don't know who he beat necessarily that day, but still, it was an impressive victory nonetheless. He's got an effective running style where he can track off the pace. He doesn't need to lead. So a horse like Rodriguez and Sand Devil might very well go out up front and kind of go at things. Mine Matoli as well. I think the one concern Captain Cook has is there's a lot of speed immediately around him on the inside. Does he get pinched back maybe a little bit further than he would like? If a horse like Rodriguez and Sand Devil really send, suddenly he's got to sit kind of behind that. But now you have a bunch of other horses kind of crashing down on you from the outside. Where does he sit in that early going? I think that's a big question because I don't think he's got the speed to go with Rodriguez. But I also think that he's a horse that doesn't need to lead and has a little bit of tactical ability there. So Captain Cook, another horse to consider. Again, a good betting race. You know, when you look at Rodriguez, Captain Cook, Sand Devil, Hill Road, Grande, Statesman, you know, like I said, even Omaha to a lesser extent, these are all horses that people I think can make a legitimate case for. And they're going to be tough in this spot. So, like I said, it's going to be a really good race. Where am I looking initially in this spot? You know, it's hard. Todd seems to be very confident in Grande. I will say that. And he's not had a strong group this year. He's kind of undersold his group this year in a lot of ways. Even if you go back and listen to some of his interviews after the Breeders' Cup, he was kind of saying, like, I need somebody to step forward because nobody really is. Grande seems like the horse that has most stepped forward for him, and he seemed to have the least number of questions about him getting the distance and handling the surface. So I think in some ways you can look at Grande as a horse that he's got the confidence in. But again, you know, he's got to do it, and he's a perfect 2 for 2. You know, coming off a maiden win and then coming right back and winning a first level allowance, both at Gulfstream Park. And like I said, he's already dealt with the 9 furlong. So I think there's a lot to like with Grande. Yes, he's a lightly raised horse, but at least unlike Cornucopia and unlike Disruptor, he's faced winners before. He's done the distance before. He's going to be able to, you know, it's not going to be a totally new experience for him to deal with things on Saturday. I think Rodriguez is very dangerous on the inside. Mike Smith, if he sends this horse and he's able to get up on the lead and maybe get comfortable on the lead, he could be dangerous because he might be able to finally show what he can do. He's a horse that, again, I need to continue to emphasize this. He's been asked to do the dirty work for his stablemates. He's been asked to sit off Citizen Bull. He's been asked to sit off Barnes and not go to the lead and let those horses go to the lead and get the easy trip. That's not his game. His game is to go to the front. He's been training very well, according to Bob Baffert. So he's been out training, certainly, a horse like Barnes. So you like to see the direction that Rodriguez is pointing. The question is, what sort of price are you going to get on this horse? I'm always going to be a sucker for Shug McGahee. I like Shug. I think he obviously does things the right way. I love seeing guys like Shug, like D. Wayne, like Bill Mott have runners in the Kentucky Derby. So certainly from that standpoint, Statesman's going to be interesting. He's a little bit more of a late running horse, though, as well. So coming off the pace, maybe sitting a little bit more mid-pack. Again, how do you work out that trip from the 11 post? That's not going to be the easiest thing in the world for him to do. So I have distance questions on my Matoli and Sand Devil, Hill Road, Statesman, Omaha, coming from off the pace. Are they going to be able to kind of get there? Are they going to get the right sort of setup? Grande, maybe a little bit more tactical than the others, also draws, I think, pretty well in that number 7 position. So for me, you got to look at kind of Rodriguez as the major pace player in this race. And then if you're looking to get, you know, depending on where the morning line is and depending on what prices look like come post time, I think a combination of Hill Road, Grande, Statesman are all kind of interesting players. And I wonder if Captain Cook does get overlooked. And if he does, he might actually end up presenting the best value in the race because he's not a Baffert, he's not a Pletcher, he's not a Brown, he's not a McGahee, Babe Dutro Jr., he's got his own baggage, he's got his own legacy for sure. But Captain Cook looked of like a very, very good horse in that Withers. So that's another one to really consider in this race, but should be just a really fun day. I can't wait for it to unfold. We got some great racing in the Gazelle, the Carter, the Distaff, the Excelsior. It's going to be a lot of fun on Saturday at Aqueduct. Well, listen, folks, that's my first look at the Wood Memorial. I think it's a great field of 12. I think it's an outstanding betting race. I think you can find some good value across the board. Some of the horses I didn't even mention, a horse like Passion Rules, a horse even like Bear Claw Necklace for Saffie Joseph Jr. There's some long shots that maybe you want to take a look at. So let me know in the comments who you like in Saturday's Wood Memorial. Well, folks, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races, reminding you to play on NYRA Bets, and also reminding you that it's now post time.